This video is for intellectuals and those who seek freedom. It is not for those who seek to be entertained. It's April 20th. Welcome to it.We.com. Oftentimes we have a sense deep down that something is wrong. We feel it, we see it, we experience it, but we cannot quite articulate it. There's a syndrome, an atmosphere, a condition, and we know it exists, but we don't yet understand how and why it came to be that way. We may have a sense, and that is a dangerous place for people to live, because if you cannot define the problem, you cannot defeat it. So let's define it. What is this syndrome? It is the convergence of three conditions: an ignorance among the people of the structure we live under, a presumption of authority by the institutions that govern, and a habitual compliance by the people themselves. Ignorance, presumption, compliance. That is the cycle. And that cycle repeats year after year, decade after decade, until eventually it is challenged. But once you begin to dig, once you start ferreting through the ins and outs, the ups and downs and the arounds of it, you begin to see it. Maybe not perfectly, but clearly enough. And once you see it, you can speak it. And once you speak it, you can act upon it. Let me give you an example. Congress. Congress, as it operates today, reflects a failure of understanding, both among the elected and those doing the electing. Now ask yourself, why do we keep electing individuals who do not demonstrate a working understanding of the system they are governing? Why do so many people not even recognize it? Because the American people, broadly speaking, do not understand the system they are participating in. Ignorance elects ignorance, and ignorance in office governs through presumption. A presumption that you will cooperate, a presumption that you will comply, a presumption that you will graduate right along with their agenda. Left versus right, that's smoke and mirrors. Because Congress moves forward no matter who is in control, and it advances its agenda, not yours. Think of the Patriot Act. Think of COVID. And here is the deeper structural failure. Congress looks up directionally. It looks up to federal power structures. It looks inward for self-promotion, advancement, and position. It does not look out, and it does not look down at the American people. A true representative looks outward. A true representative looks downward, broadly, at the people and says, I serve them and I do it selflessly. Until that changes, nothing changes. Now look at the courts. The courts function in large part as a high throughput administrative process, a conveyor belt. And why does it work? Because we accept it. We pay the fines. We move on. We say, that's just the system. No, that is not the system operating correctly. That is ignorance feeding the system. We do not know our rights. We do not understand process. We do not assert due process. And because of that, we capitulate. So what is the point? The point is this. Eventually, we must become aware. We must observe. We must know. We must understand. And then we must apply wisdom. Because when we defeat our own ignorance, we begin to force the system to operate within its own limits. And when enough people do that, everything changes. Understand the mechanism: ignorance, presumption, compliance, reinforcement. Break that cycle and the system changes. Now consider a practical example. When 10, 20, 50, even 100 individuals in a jurisdiction begin to demand jury trials, the system experiences immediate strain. Docket congestion, prosecutorial overload, resource limitations. cases begin to stall, some are dismissed. The system does not collapse, but it is forced to operate within its actual capacity. That is not theory, that is process. Why does this happen? Because individuals stop cooperating blindly. They begin understanding, they begin asserting. That is power, that is restoration. Now, understanding something else, there will always be noise. There will always be those who snap and yap and bark without ever taking the time to understand what is being said. People like Bradley Allen or Christopher Wayne, who ignores the author's message and wants to inject his own message, his superior message. He doesn't understand from the outset the end game, the objective of the author. He wants to be the author. People like this criticize without comprehension. They dismiss without inquiry. They want you to look at them, to follow them, to believe they have the answer. But they are a distraction. This is not about following, this is about understanding. The Liberty Dialogue stands alone because it certainly isn't about me. Anybody can use the dialogues and assert what's within them and duplicate exactly what I'm doing without my assistance. It is not about any one man. It's about the man or woman within inside of you. And it's a framework. The Liberty Dialogues is a framework. It's a pathway, a construct rooted in truth. It teaches us how the system actually works so that we can work within it and force it to operate within its own proper limits. And more importantly, it shifts the burden from the individual defending himself to the system proving its authority. Now listen carefully, because this is where most people stop. Like many of you, I believe I have a solution, a real solution that would solve most of America's problems. And it is not political, it is procedural, it is not violent, even though some people might suffer, i.e. those who wish to enforce the new solution. But the solution is structural. It does not destroy the system, it forces the system to confront itself. It is simple, it is powerful, and it is profoundly counterintuitive, so much so that it may be resisted at all costs. Someone or some people, those who are enforcing the solution, may even lose their liberty, their property, and perhaps even their lives. Because when the solution comes to life, it produces real, viable traction. You see, from that moment there will be an uproar unlike anything we've seen in a long time in this country. And the American people will rise, not in confusion, but in clarity, because what they know to be the syndrome that they can't necessarily describe, they will see it and say, yes, that's it. And that is the solution. And that will be clarity. And they will say, no, this cannot be. You will not trump the solution. You will not circumvent the one path that restores our freedom and our natural born rights. That is what happens when people finally see. That is what happens when ignorance is defeated. But it requires something of all of us. It requires that we look beyond ourselves. It requires that we think in terms of 100 years out, 500 years out into the future. What is practical? What is necessary? What must be done to ensure that freedom is not just remembered but restored? There are solutions. I have a solution. Perhaps you have a solution. And it begins with understanding that there's a syndrome and we must be able to define it. It begins with awareness. It begins with the Liberty Dialogues. It begins with you duplicating the efforts of everyone else using the Liberty Dialogues. This is how we reverse the process. This is how we stop looking up at power and start looking out, across, and down, all across the fruited plain at all the people yearning to be free. This is how we restore a once free republic. So do not begin with conclusions, begin with questions. Do not begin with resistance, begin with understanding. Do not begin by looking up. Begin by examining the structure itself. The Liberty Dialogues is the path. Walk it, live it, and let's be free. And as always, may truth reign supreme.